Just use a handheld mic. All right. We ready, Miss Tiffany?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday Talk. Great to see you. Really appreciate the turnout. And to get us started this morning, I'm going to have Don Infante, the president of RoRo and ROVA, talk about the exciting agenda for this afternoon. Don.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. How are you? We have a great ROVA for you this afternoon at 2 o'clock, right here. Speaker, stand up, David. He was Colonel retired David Cassidy. Who also happened to be the senior military aide to the Vice President of the United States during a couple of generations that she's going to talk to you about. So if you want to learn all about the inside scoop, the Vice President under Bush Quayle and Clinton Gore, come on by. Okay, Dave's going to tell them about it this afternoon. It's going to be a great presentation. I'd love to see you all there. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, one other announcement I wanted to make real quickly. Channel 732 is back. So that is up and running. So we once again will be able to give you a couple of options. So if you want to catch this version of Tuesday Talk, or you want to capture the ROVA presentation later this afternoon, you'll have two options. You will now be able to watch it broadcast on channel 732, or you can catch it on a YouTube, and the link is available through the calendar. The link is available through the calendar. So we're excited to have that back as well. Next up, I wanted to introduce Lauren's replacement. You know that Lauren Rose, the Director of Administration here at Regency Oaks for the past 14 years, has retired. Lauren just recently had her first grandchild, and she is of the age where she said, I'd rather be grandparenting than working. So she sold her house. It sold 4 hours after she put it on the market. She got an above asking price offer. And as she is moving up to the Flagler Beach area where her daughter and new grandson live, and she's going to spend 2 days a week providing care for the baby. So it's a wonderful opportunity for her. We will miss her. She put in 14 solid years. It was going to be very difficult to find someone who was going to replace Lauren. She had a lot of experience. She knew all the residents. She was my right-hand person for years and years and years. It took a lot of searching, but I have found a great candidate and hired her. I am so excited to have Renee join our team. You are going to come to love her. She is going to be great. We all need to be patient and give her an opportunity to learn the ropes. But without further ado, let me introduce Renee. Come on up and say a few words.
Good morning. I am super excited to be here. This is my first Tuesday Talk, as you know, so I'll be kind of relying on you guys to, like you said, show me the ropes. So I've met some of you, and I'm still learning faces and trying to match up the names, so please feel free to stop me and remind me of just who you are. So, well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to meeting all of you again and getting to know more about you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, just a few other updates. The pool is working. And so, as you may or may not know, that pool went down last Thursday week. And so what had happened is we had lost power to the heaters. And so we immediately called an electrician. It was inside the breaker box where the failure had occurred. I don't have staff, I don't allow staff to go into the electrical boxes. We really need a professional trained electrician to do that. We put a call in Thursday a week ago, more than 10 days ago, and then they finally showed up Monday. That just continues to be another situation that we're experiencing with COVID. There's people are struggling to find workers, and we're seeing it with all of our trades. We're seeing it with our vendors and our supply line. Parts are taking that we used to be able to get in 4 or 5 days are now taking 4 and 5 weeks. Our vendors, whether they're electricians or plumbers or carpet or general workers, are all delayed. And so thank you for your patience, but it is up and working. I tested it this morning personally just to make sure I wasn't going to come in here and make a commitment that didn't know to be true. The pool temperature this morning was 88 and the jacuzzi was 104. So for your swimmers and exercisers, it is back. School supplies. We are right in the middle of a drive to collect school supplies for our associates. We've done this in prior years, and this is, you'll find a bin if you'd like to participate. There is a bin in both lobbies where you can make a contribution. It's standard school supplies that you might expect that children would need. It is going to run through the 21st, which is middle of next week. And if you'd like to contribute, we'd appreciate your support on that. This Thursday at 11 o'clock, we are doing a transition of care meeting. Now, for all of you old timers, you know that is something that we have done many, many times in the past. It's about 32 pages. We do the first half of the book, the first 16 pages in the summer, and then we do the next 16 pages in the fall. We didn't do it in 2020 because of COVID, but the transition of care meeting is an opportunity for you to learn how your contract works in regards to transitions in your life. Whether you need assisted living or home health, skilled nursing, whether you just need our IHS services, this talks about contractually how that works. And we go through the 32 most frequently asked questions about transition. It's an interdisciplinary approach. I will have the skilled nursing home administrator, Melissa, our AL administrator. We'll have Ann and Travis, our admission team from the health center. I'll be there along with Sherry to talk about the financial side. We'll have Leslie, our director of resident services, there. And so there's a panel of 10 or 11 of us who will talk about the transitions. And this gets into the real nitty-gritty of how your contract works. What are free days? How are they applied? Who makes the ultimate decision whether I stay in IL or I go somewhere else? What is this medical advisory board? And so if you have any interest in learning about the nuts and bolts of your contract and how that affects transitions, this is the meeting you want to attend. Now, we will broadcast it as well, so you'll have the opportunity to catch it if you're not in attendance. But if you want to come and participate and ask a specific question, we'll give you that opportunity as well. So once again, that's this Thursday at 11 o'clock. It will be right here in the town hall. Okay. That's all I had. I'm going to cede the balance of my time to our guest speaker. I was stalling and hoping that the maintenance team would get here to open up the door, but that hasn't happened, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we have a presentation on the Florida Aqua system. And when Roger moved in, Roger, you've been here 30, 45 days?
On a part-time basis. I'm still trying to downsize.
Okay. Roger is a new resident, and so he attended a new resident luncheon, and For those of you who remember, that's where all the managers get together. We welcome the new resident, and we just get to know each other. And Roger just had this fascinating story about the Aqua Preserve here in Tampa Bay, and it was such a compelling story that we asked him to come and share that. I think you're going to find his presentation informative and interesting. And so, Roger, we are delighted to turn this over to you and look forward to your remarks. Roger Wilson.
I hope you applaud after I get through talking. But you don't have to. It really, truly is a challenge to downsize. I never realized it. Everybody's had that experience. But, and it gets complicated because, or when you live in the same house for 50 years. All of a sudden the house is full, the garage is full, the work shed is full. And you think, how am I going to filter all of this and get it down to a size to move in here? So I've been, here part-time and still at home part-time. It's an interesting challenge. You don't want to throw away anything because everything's important. But, you have to learn to turn loose of things. I've been involved in conservation all my life, even though I didn't realize it in the very beginning, because I was only about that big when I first became aware of some things. I grew up at Johns Pass, and I promise you that in the 40s and even into the 50s, a few years, Johns Pass was a pristine fishing village. If you went there to fish, you caught fish. Didn't matter whether you were on a boat or whether you were fishing off the old original bridge. And for those that may not be aware of Johns Pass, it's a waterway between Treasure Island and Madeira Beach. And it's been there for generations. Originally, by the way, it was cut by a hurricane. The wind and the water just decided to come across the sandbar, which is what it was back then, almost, and they cut a channel. And it's been a very important channel ever since then. And that was over 100 years ago. Hopefully we'll never have a hurricane like that. But the fishing was just incredible. The aquatic resources were just unbelievable. Today, for an example, they talk about going to Crystal River, Homosassa Springs to go scalloping. And it's the season for scallop fishing or hunting. But back in my day, when I was just a little kid, we used to go out on the healthy grass flats and pick up scallops left, right. But they were just that abundant. If you wanted to earn a few extra pennies, back in the day, you would get a rowboat from somebody, someplace, and you'd bring along your Coleman lantern at night, and on an outgoing tide, you would tie up to the old original bridge, and the tide would carry the shrimp off of the grass flats out into the Gulf. And you would be able to dip net them left, right, because the light would shine off from the Coleman lantern. The light would shine off their eyes. And on a decent night, a kid could get maybe 150 shrimp. Well, you keep the big ones to eat, and you'd sell the rest of them to the local bait shacks for a penny a piece. But that was high cotton back then because Pepsi was a nickel. Right? How many of you remember a nickel, And so, it was a great place for a kid to grow up. But even though I was young, I was beginning to hear some of the fishermen talk about how things seem to be changing a little bit. And I might add that many of the fishermen were veterans who came home after WW2, or they came back to Florida because they had been trained here for military action. And you have to understand that Florida was a large training camp. There were training camps all over Florida, partly because it was flat, so that was good for the Army Air Force, and partly also because we had a lot of coastline to use for landings and waterfront type training. But I would hear these older people, the 25 or 30-year-olds, talk about how things seem to be changing. And sure enough, eventually it began to come out in full bloom that the problem was with the real problem was all the dredging and filling that took place. And in effect, that created a situation where you would dredge up a healthy grass flat and put it on top of another one, wait a few months for all of the, water to drain out. And we used to go out there and play on these places. You'd jump up and down and you'd sink to your knees, and we thought that was kind of neat, for when you're 8, 9, 10 years old. But then they built houses on them. And it was just a wholesale activity. And you can't fault the people who live there today because they don't know. The typical person that lives along our shoreline does not realize that a significant portion of it was man-made. They just don't think about that. But it's a fact. If you go along the Gulf beaches today, I promise you, no matter where you stop, half of that land, half of that strip of beach on the bay side is going to be the result of man-made activity. And in some places it's really more than 50%. So maybe it's time to take a break from me talking and show you the video that we have. It's only about a 5 or 6 minute video, and it was made by the Pinellas County Heritage Park staff, the Heritage Park in Largo. They decided that since I grew up there, I would be a good person to interview. But the truth of the matter is, I guess they considered me an old timer. I'm 84 years old today, and not this day, but now. And I had experienced all of this. So take a listen and look at this, because this is really a good explanation.
In Pinellas County Public Schools and Florida State University, he completed military service as an Army Ranger Special Forces soldier. In 1968, he campaigned and was elected to serve in the Florida House of Representatives.
Today I smile a little bit to myself when I hear people say, oh, it's college season, let's go up to Homosassa or Crystal River. Because it reminds me that when I was a kid, we used to go scalloping off of John's Pass on the healthy grass flats that were then available. I've often thought people ask me, how did you become such a passionate conservationist? So after thinking about it some years ago, I realized that it happened when I was a youngster growing up at John's Pass. And John's Pass in the 40s, and even a little bit into the 50s, was a truly pristine fishing village. And it was a great place for a kid to grow up. And I remember hearing some of the older guys, like the 30 or 35-year-old guys, that had come home after WW2, after the war, either because they lived here or they'd been in Florida for training. And they would talk like they noticed there was a change taking place. I realized that when you have a label that says, Bogachiva Bay is a national example of how not to dredge and fill, and you can see that. Essentially, dredging and filling involved picking up one healthy grass flat and putting it on top of another one. If there are any mangroves in the way, don't worry about it, we'll just cut them down. And you wait a few months for all the soil to settle, for the water to drain out, and then you put a dike up around the area that they wanted to fill with outlets, like little box outlets. They're not so little, they were maybe 4 feet wide and maybe 8 or 10 feet long. And they would have planks in the middle that they could drop in and make like a little dam. But as the water drained out from the pumped in land, they would elevate these planks. And pretty soon you got to the top and you realize, well, okay, everything's drained out, and we can just wait another month or so and we can put houses on it. And by the way, when you create a finger fill, you heal up the natural tidal flow that moves through mangrove roots and moves in a flushing action. Now, instead of a flushing action, the finger fill and other dredged in land area has an up and down tidal flow. That's why at the head of a canal that's in between the finger fill, sometimes they'll have floating debris in there. Because the current is not flushing, it's just stagnant, it goes up and down. What one generation of public officials do doesn't really come to roost until the next generation of public officials comes along. It was a new idea, and the developers didn't like it, so it was controversial, truthfully. And I have to admit, I borrowed the idea from the upland activity because we had honey preserves, we had natural preserves. So I said, well, if we have that, why can't we have an aquatic preserve? And that's how that transition was made. And it was controversial. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but one night in front of the Senate chambers, it almost became physical. One of the developers really got upset. And it was because he owned some upland as well as some submerged land, and he wanted to expand his property. Some of the older people in the legislature, some of the older guys, they said, well, do what you can now, Roger, but, maybe come back in a couple of 3 years and do some more if you want to. And, it was kind of like a trade-off to get the bill passed. And I said, okay, fine. So in 1972, the entire county was put in an aquatic preserve. And so now today we've got 41 aquatic preserves around the state. And it's done in order to preserve. So first you got to repair. Then, repair, restore, and maintain these natural resources. And the irony of it is, it's for the benefit of the people who live here or the people who come to visit us. And it's interesting. If you just measure the coastline, it's about 1,200 miles. But if you measure the coastline to include the bays and inlets, it all of a sudden jumps up to 8,000 miles. So Florida has a lot of coastline, and we need to protect it. Once you ruin it, it's gone. No more. So you need to preserve it. And one of the things you have to constantly do is educate people. And I've been surprised over the last 3 or 4 months at how few people know that we even have a state aquatic preserve system. And so it's a constant marketing, if you will, that we have an aquatic preserve system here in front of our county, and it's throughout the state, and it's done to preserve, or repair first, and then preserve our natural resource for the benefit of the people who live here, as well as the visitors. Natural resource protection in Florida is critical. I would like to see more local officials become conservation-oriented, dedicated to realizing that there are limits and we need to be aware of the importance of our natural resources. And again, I remember hearing conversations when I was just a little kid down there at John's Pass, involving the older people who were fishing, be it commercial or sports fishing. And they were noticing a change. When you dredge up one grassland and put it on top of another one, and you eliminate a mangrove island in the process, you got to think, well, wait a minute. There's no place for the birds to go. There's no place for the little aquatic life to grow up or to start. Everything that happens in the Gulf of Mexico, either directly or indirectly, began in our bays and inlets. So what we do here at home influences the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not that old, but, from 69 to 19, it's 50 years.
In 1969, the Florida legislature initiated a new program within our state. A trajectory of unfettered degradation by dredge and fill was halted. Boca Ciega Bay became the first aquatic preserve in Florida to be established by legislative action. More designations followed. Now, Florida has 41 aquatic preserves managed by the Florida Coastal Office of the Department of Environmental Protection. Tampa Bay's 4 aquatic preserves include nearly 20% of the 2.2 million acres designated statewide. Most of the underwater habitats of these preserves are out of sight, but we all benefit from the seafood, clean water, and other natural products and services they provide. Management of each aquatic preserve is based on science and on specific set conditions. Scientists, decision makers, and local citizens play an important role in identifying and addressing issues. Aquatic preserve staff help coordinate habitat restoration and public education projects related to coastal ecosystems. They are on the front line to identify and address issues. We all work together to maintain the health of our underwater backyard.
But it was an interesting experience growing up at John's Pass and seeing the unfortunate changes that started back in the day. But fortunately, there were enough conservationists in Florida that spoke to the issue, and we realized that there had to be a change, and so that change was realized. By the way, they said 41 aquatic preserves. Now, last year, the legislature created another aquatic preserve in the upper Suncoast area, so there's 42 now. And I'd like to see the day when there's many more, because we have a lot of shoreline to protect. And it's important to remember, you think about Florida, in the video there was a comment made about how if you just walk around the edge of Florida, it's about 1,200 miles. But if you follow the tidal line, if you follow the water in and out of all the land, all of a sudden it jumps up to about 84,000 miles. That's a big, big difference, and give you some idea about how Florida's shoreline is structured. But you can't stop there, because Florida is a waterborne state. And I want you to think about this. We kind of take our water for granted even when it rains inconveniently, but we need the rain. It's very important to Florida. You have the shoreline, but then you go inland, and you got to think about all the rivers and lakes, the creeks. That's part of it's part of Florida's water supply. Then you don't stop there, because you also have to think about the water that's stored for us underneath the ground. Florida is built on limestone for the most part. And limestone is kind of like a series of caves and caverns and room space, if you will, where water can be stored. And it's very important that we take care of the underground water supply that Florida has. And unfortunately, some of the cities, some of the counties have used that area as a discharge point. And that's no good. You shouldn't be putting your half-treated or even treated water waste into Florida's aquatic system that's underground throughout Florida. It just is not a good mix, and it's going to catch up with us. And as Florida continues to grow, we've got about 22 million people in Florida now. We're growing, they say, about 1,000 people a day, and that's incredible. And particularly, it's incredible when you think about Pinellas County. I think of Pinellas County as the other Florida peninsula. And you wonder, how many more people can you squeeze into Pinellas County? You think about that. Shouldn't there be some kind of limit, some kind of concern expressed for putting people on top of one another? Have you ever noticed the new developments where they don't spread them out with single-story homes? They go up. And even if they're building homes, they put the second. You ever notice this now? This is not just by chance. They put the second floor into a house so that the bedrooms are upstairs, and that allows them more space to put more homes per acre. You don't have that spread out, waste as far as a developer is concerned. So you have to rethink some of these things, because someday there's going to be a day of reckoning, I promise you, whether it's our time or the next time around. And in there I allude to the fact that what's really interesting, if you're involved in community service and you live long enough, you all of a sudden realize that every generation, almost every generation, creates a problem for the next generation. And you say, wait a minute, we got to stop that. We don't need any more problems. We got enough on our table now. So, well, I'll yield to any question. I could talk to you the rest of the morning about this, but I'll yield to any questions. If somebody's got a question or an observation to make. Yes, sir.
I don't know the name, because at the Piney Point where they have the waste lagoons that overflowed, went into the Gulf.
Well, actually, it overflowed into Tampa Bay, and then, some of that would go out into the Gulf.
Right. Now they're talking about pumping it down below to get rid of it. What's your reaction to that?
I don't like that, because what are you doing pumping it, dirty water, so to speak, into the underground sources that are eventually our drinking water, and it gets into other places. Florida is truly an open cavern structure underneath. As a result of the development over the last million years, we've got a pile of dirt on top, but underneath all of that, it's limestone. And limestone will wear if there's too much water and collapse if there's not enough water, because water does play a role in supporting the limestone caverns, and that's an important consideration. But is it really a good idea to take your dirty water and put it in the ground? It disappears, you don't see it, but that's not good. It really isn't. And the more people we have in Florida, the more pumping that's going to take place. Solve the problem up top. And one of the things you learn also about being involved in community service activities is you begin to discover that too many public officials, and I say this respectfully, but it's true, they don't really push behind what appears to be a problem to get past the symptoms to the real problem. Think about that. You know, it's like when you go to the doctor and you say, I got a headache. Well, the doctor should be thinking, well, why do you have a headache? He wants to push past that and find out, you know, what's really going on in your body. Well, public officials don't always do that, because sometimes all they do is treat the symptom. And you want to push them and say, are you really treating the problem, or is it just a symptom? And that's something that we have to consider very seriously, because Florida is a growth state. And we need to, you know, get on top of things and you know, do the corrections correctly. Are there any? Yes, sir.
I came here to ask a question, and it ties in directly with this.
Uh-oh.
And this is really directed toward Brant also. I've lived here 10 years. I live on the 5th floor. And I turn on the water to get hot water, and it runs and runs and runs. We installed LED lights here because we wanted to conserve electricity. I feel real guilty about all the water that I have wasted in those 10 years waiting for hot water. So my question to you, Brant, you're asking for suggestions for the 1922 capital budget. My request is, could you please consider putting in a loop system so that I don't have to waste all that water, because water is a very precious resource.
And so, thank you, John. It actually, it's the other way around. We have, our current system is a loop system, and that is the cause of why we lose so much efficiency in our water circulation. We all share the same water within the building. It's on a loop system. There are circulating pumps, and there is a certain amount of time that is required for that water to go from lukewarm to hot, and so it is very wasteful. We've done the analysis, and financially it doesn't make sense to modernize and update the building. The correct way to do it is to go in and put individual water heaters in each and every unit. That's the most efficient way to do it. It's the most cost effective way to do it in terms of what energy costs. But going in and doing that, we did the return on investment, and it was a payback of 14, 15 years. And so unfortunately, we just have an older structure there. These buildings are 30 years old, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to convert from a loop system where we all share the water to an individual apartment with your own hot water heater. And so we've invested a significant amount over the last couple of years in updating that loop system and trying to get some better efficiencies, and I think we've been pretty successful. I can remember 2 years ago, we were getting complaints that people were having to wait 10 minutes for hot water. You should have that down to your apartment where even in the worst part of the day, when no one is using the water and it's not truly circulating because of demand, you shouldn't have to wait more than a couple of minutes. If you find that that is not the case, you probably have a water air bubble, and we've gotten really good at taking those out of the system. So if you are having an excessive wait, please notify us, and Darwin and the team, they've gotten good at trying to correct that issue.
Please remove my water bubble.
Okay. Now, one other thing, and so the one other thing, I used to tell Ed Hawks this. Ed Hawks would say, you know, I get up every morning and I turn on the water. It's taking 30 minutes for the water to get hot. I said, well, Ed, what time are you getting up? He said, about 4. And I used to tell Ed, well, don't get up at 4 o'clock. Because here's one of the things that happens with that system, and there really is not an answer for this. So everybody goes to bed 8, 9, 10, 11, midnight, whenever you go to bed. And then that water has no demand. It's not driven. The circulation pumps are keeping pressure on the system, but it's not generating movement. Hot water is not being used. The boilers are on standby. And so they sit for 3 or 4 hours before the first person gets up in the morning and goes to turn on a faucet and wait for hot water. That's the first demand of the morning. That first person who's energizing the system is going to take 20 minutes. Now, we've gotten some improvement because I have security every morning at 3:30 in both buildings, go into a vacant apartment and turn on every faucet, and I let it run for 30 minutes because that's how I'm energizing that system to try to get quicker water to the residents who get up at 4 o'clock. So it's not a great solution, but it's the best we've been able to come up with.
I want to show you a couple of still pictures. You saw these same scenes in the video, but that's a flash picture. Here's a still picture. Here's what the area of Johns Pass looked like back in, what's the date there? It says 51. I think that's 51. I'm reading it up there, 51. But you can see the white. It's already started. The dredging and filling has already started. But take a good look at this picture and notice the mangrove island here and this area up here. This area up here, by the way, is Bay Pines, Doomy Road area. All right? But I'm going to show you another picture that will really surprise you. And it's much better for you to see this as a still picture. That's what the same area looks like in what was the date down there?
Let's hold the other one up too.
Yeah, the before and after.
Yeah.
But just look at these. How can anybody imagine to do something like this, let alone actually carry it out? That's Bogasaga Bay, Johns Pass area.
Yes.
And think of, all that land is man-made. It wasn't created by Mother Nature. In fact, to make this land, you had to destroy a significant part of Mother Nature. So it's an interesting comparison when you see the before and after in a still picture. I use these whenever I give a talk. But that video is better than me talking, so I'm glad they showed it. And the final, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them for you. But there is one last thing. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're riding a bicycle around the track or walking with a cane. Your vote is your voice. And if you're not registered to vote, you better get registered to vote, especially if you respect the veterans. They risk their time and body to keep our freedoms. And one of the freedoms that you have as a citizen is the ability to go out and vote. So that's very important. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. All right, just real quickly, thank you for letting us run overtime. Any last questions that Bill?
Okay, I just wanted to bring up that this water situation that you were talking about, because we pay for the water, we pay to heat it, and then you throw it down the drain, so we pay another charge to go through the system. So, just going up to run your water for half an hour, it's more costly than you might think. You know, when we talk about here about how we can't correct the problem. I don't like the word I can't.
Well,
Not a good word.
yeah, so let me be clear. It's not a question of can, it's a question of where do we want to utilize our capital dollars, and what's more important to us. And so there is always there's a way to correct it, absolutely. But when we did the return on analysis on the investment, it was not a great return on our investment. There are other things I'd rather put our money to, like an assisted living, like a memory care, and so, you know, the return on investment, if it's out at 10, 12, 14 years, it's just not a good investment. And, you know, I understand that as someone who's interested in the environment and conservation, that we want to do our part and we want to make a contribution, but we also, there's a business side of it. And we have to make smart business decisions as to where we're going to spend our funds. And so that's what's driving the decision. It's not that we cannot find a solution. We just don't think it's a good investment.
I was just thinking, most of our dishwashers have delay cycles on them. If we all got in the habit of running them overnight, toward morning, it might relieve some of this pressure. And they've got 6 or 8 hour delay cycles. If we could just kind of get in the habit of doing that, it might help.
Yeah, and remember, here's the key. If we can get water to your apartment, even if you're at the very end of the run, at the end of the hallway, within a matter of, 10, 15 seconds. It's almost instantaneous, except for early in the morning. Somebody has to be first. And then the other thing that I would share with you is, if that is not your experience, there's something wrong with your unit. And I got Don, but you have to call and let us come and take care of it. What you have is a bubble in your system. There's individual feeds off of the main circulation trunk, and if you get an air bubble in there, it prevents us from being able to get water to you either consistently or quickly. And one of the things that you should look for, you have an air bubble if you have water and it's hot one moment, warm the next, lukewarm the next. If you're not getting consistency in your temperature, you have an air bubble. That's how we diagnose it. And so if you're seeing that or experiencing that, call and let us know. That is something we can fix.
Last week we had the fire alarm that went for 15 minutes. We are told to stay in our apartment. Do you know what it's like to sit here and waiting 15 minutes before it ever shut off? I think couldn't a robocall or something be done to ease our mind as to what is going on?
So that's a multiple question. So let me go back and address each part of it. So I know that the decibels are really, really loud when the fire alarm goes off. It's designed to be that way. It is built to code. Code mandates the decibel level that we must provide. It's that loud because it is designed to wake someone from a sound sleep who may be taking medications, sleeping medications, or who maybe don't have their hearing aids in. But that decibel level is mandated by the state. And so we cannot turn it down. We cannot disconnect it. That is a state requirement. It's required by code. We are in compliance. It's designed and built entirely to code. One of the other things, and I know this is an irritant for residents, but when we have a fire alarm, the fire marshal is not authorizing us to turn that off. The fire marshal responds every time there's an alarm. The fire marshal and the fire department get out here, and the only one authorized to turn off the alarm is the fire captain. And the fire captain is not going to turn off that alarm until he's 100% confident that there's no fire or that the fire is contained. And so I know it's terrible that you're stuck in that apartment and the fire alarm is going off, and it seems like it's going off forever. I'm sympathetic to that, but we're doing that to make sure you're safe. And his reason for that is if a fire alarm, if we turn it off, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to go outside your apartment to investigate and try to figure out what was going on. And so that's why the fire marshal doesn't allow us to turn that off. When that alarm is on, our fire practice is shelter in place. That's what we want you to do. I understand it's loud, it's inconvenient, it's an annoyance, but it's also designed to keep you safe. And so that's why we do it. Last piece of that is in the middle of a fire alarm, as staff is trying to find, locate, and deal with a potential fire, the last thing in the world that we need to be doing is a robocall. That's not an informational robocall, is not where we should be setting our priorities. It's to preserve life, protect property, and make sure that you are safe. And then after the fact, if we can do a robocall, I'm happy to do that. But not right in the middle of the crisis. In the middle of the crisis, we're preserving life and protecting property.
It would have been nice to know afterwards what.
I think we can do that. Yeah, we can notify you it was a false alarm. That's a good idea. A false alarm.
I found a semi-quiet place. I had left my apartment to go empty some trash and couldn't get back to it because the fire doors closed on me. So I hid in the refuse room. And there's no alarm.
No alarm in there.
And the door closed. So for 25 minutes, I stood by the door.
All right. And most importantly, Gene did not cross through a closed set of fire doors. Good job. Thank you.
I was under the impression that our contract with Spectrum ends in July. And so I'm just asking, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel yet in your negotiations?
Yeah. So we are closing in on our negotiations. I don't think Spectrum is prepared to enforce their end of July contract requirement. We are negotiating with 3 companies, Spectrum, Centrix, and Frontier. And we have all the bids in except for Spectrum. So it's going to be very difficult for them to hold us to the letter of the contract when they, in fact, are the ones who have not timely submitted their proposal. So it's on our agenda. We're continuing to push them, and I anticipate we're going to get a decision. It's going to be sooner rather than later. Soon.
When is the construction supposed to start?
So construction, boy. So it's everything is pending on the building permit. We have at least at this point gotten recognition from the city that they have the building permit. So that's a first sign, not a promising sign. We have pushed the construction start date back to September 12th. From August 15th to September 12th. So that's not too bad a delay, but we're ready to go. We're waiting on the county, and as soon as they issue that building permit, we're prepared to start.
Is it county or city?
I'm not quite sure. It's in the county building, but I don't know if it's the city that actually issues the building permit or if it's the county. I'm not sure I have that answer. Anyone know? Any of my engineers out there? Where's DiMarino when I need him? He'd know. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming out. Roger, thank you again. Great presentation.
Let me.
One more word from Roger.
Well, briefly, many of you have grandchildren or, some form of second generation, third generation, maybe fourth generation. Share today's story with your younger family members, especially the children. The website, it's available for everybody and anybody. It's the Friends of the Tampa Bay Aquatic Preserves. If you go there, you'll have some choices and you can click on the screen. But it's good for the kids to start learning about the importance of their natural resources. Thank you.